My beloved child, do not move away from this moment too quickly. Something has been trying to reach the quietest part of you, and what you are about to hear was meant to find you when your heart was finally still enough to recognize it. There are moments when a message arrives not because everything is falling apart, but because something hidden can no longer remain buried. This is one of those moments. Your soulmate may be going through a difficult season, carrying emotions they have not known how to explain, and somewhere beneath the silence, the distance, the unanswered questions, and the brave face they show the world, there is a part of them hoping that you will somehow understand what they cannot yet say out loud. They are not asking you to rescue them. They are not asking you to abandon yourself for them. But something inside their heart has begun reaching toward you in a way that is becoming impossible for them to ignore, and the reason behind it is deeper than you think. You have sensed something changing, even if you could not name it. Perhaps it came as a strange heaviness in an otherwise peaceful moment. Perhaps their memory appeared without warning while you were doing something completely ordinary. Perhaps you found yourself wondering about them with an intensity that seemed to come from nowhere, only to dismiss it a few minutes later. You told yourself that you were imagining things. You tried to remain practical. You tried not to read meaning into every silence, every memory, every coincidence. And that was wise, because your life cannot be built on assumptions. Yet there is something important you need to understand. Sometimes the deepest emotional shifts do not announce themselves loudly. Sometimes they begin behind closed doors, in late-night thoughts, in unfinished conversations, in a person sitting alone and realizing that the one heart they wish they could speak to is the heart they have been afraid to approach. Your soulmate has been trying to hold more together than anyone around them realizes. On the outside, they may still appear composed. They may answer questions normally, continue their routine, smile when expected, and pretend that everything is manageable. But inside, a different story has been unfolding. Something has confronted them with the limits of their own strength. It may not be one dramatic event. It may be many smaller things arriving at once. Pressure, disappointment, uncertainty, responsibilities, memories, decisions, and the growing realization that they can no longer keep avoiding what their heart has been trying to tell them. And in the middle of that internal storm, your presence has become unexpectedly significant. Not because you are responsible for fixing their pain, but because when they think of emotional safety, honesty, understanding, or the version of themselves they wish they could become, your name keeps appearing somewhere inside that picture. There is something they almost said. This is where the story becomes more delicate. At some point recently, they came closer to reaching out than you may ever know. Their hand may have hovered over a phone. They may have opened an old conversation. They may have searched your name, looked at a photograph, remembered a sentence you once spoke, or imagined what they would say if there were no fear between you. They started building the message in their mind. The first words came easily. Then everything after that became difficult. Because how does a person explain that they miss someone when they are not sure they have earned the right to say it? How do they admit they are struggling when they have spent so much time appearing strong? How do they say, "I need you to understand me," when part of them fears you have already decided to leave the past behind? That hesitation is not meaningless. It reveals the conflict inside them. One part wants to remain guarded because being guarded feels safer. Another part is tired of pretending distance does not hurt. One part says, do not disturb their peace. Another whispers, but what if they are the only person who would understand? One part remembers everything that went wrong, every misunderstanding, every delay, every moment when pride became louder than vulnerability. Yet another part remembers the way your energy once made them feel seen in a world where they often felt misunderstood. These two sides have been battling quietly, and the battle has intensified because their current circumstances are forcing them to confront something they once believed they could postpone forever. They are discovering that avoiding a feeling does not erase it. Silence does not always create closure. Time does not automatically remove significance. Sometimes time simply reveals what was real by stripping away everything that was temporary. Your soulmate has tried to occupy their mind with other concerns. They have tried to be reasonable. They may even have told themselves that whatever existed between you belonged to another chapter. But difficult seasons have a way of exposing what matters. When life becomes noisy, the heart starts searching for what feels true. When certainty disappears, people remember who made them feel grounded. And when the masks become exhausting, the soul begins longing for the places where it did not have to perform. This is why their thoughts of you have become more intense. It is not merely nostalgia. Nostalgia looks backward because the past was comforting. What they are experiencing feels different. Their mind is not only replaying what happened, it is imagining what could still happen if honesty finally replaced fear. They have wondered how you are. They have wondered whether you still think of them. They have wondered if too much time has passed. Most of all, they have wondered whether you would recognize the person they are becoming, because something in this difficult chapter is changing them from the inside. There was once a version of your soulmate who believed strength meant handling everything alone. They thought vulnerability gave other people too much power. They learned to hide disappointment behind silence and uncertainty behind distance. If they became overwhelmed, they withdrew. If they cared too deeply, they acted as if they cared less. If they feared rejection, they sometimes rejected the possibility before anyone else could. And that pattern protected them for a while. But now the protection has become a prison. They are beginning to realize that the walls built to keep pain out also kept tenderness out. The silence used to avoid difficult conversations also prevented beautiful conversations from happening. And somewhere in that realization, they have begun thinking about you differently. You may have believed they did not notice your patience. They noticed. You may have believed they forgot the moments when you tried to understand them. They did not. You may have assumed your absence made no difference because they did not openly react. But some reactions happen after the room is empty. Some realizations arrive weeks, months, or longer after the moment that caused them. They remember details they never told you they remembered. A look on your face. A question you asked. A moment when you could have judged them but chose gentleness instead. A time when your intuition seemed to understand something before they explained it. These memories have returned because their present circumstances have made them appreciate what they once took for granted. And yet, my child, there is a reason you are hearing this message with caution woven into its comfort. You are not being called to chase someone who refuses to communicate. You are not being asked to carry another person's entire emotional burden. Love is not measured by how much pain you are willing to absorb. Compassion does not require self-abandonment. If your soulmate is meant to move closer to you, they must also move toward honesty, responsibility, and courage. The connection cannot survive on your understanding alone. This difficult time may be awakening them, but awakening must become action. Feelings may be powerful, but feelings without truth can leave two people trapped in endless possibility. That is exactly what your soulmate is beginning to understand. They know, perhaps for the first time with complete clarity, that if they reach you again, they cannot come with half-truths. They cannot arrive only because loneliness frightened them. They cannot expect you to rebuild what they were unwilling to protect. Something inside them knows that the next conversation, if it happens, has to be different. This is why they have delayed. Not only because they are afraid of your response, but because they are wrestling with what they are finally ready to admit about themselves. There is a confession forming inside them, and it is larger than, "I miss you." Missing you is only the surface. Beneath it is regret. Beneath the regret is realization. Beneath the realization is a truth they resisted because accepting it changes the story they have been telling themselves. They once thought the distance between you was proof that the connection was not meant to continue. Now they are beginning to wonder if the distance was actually the place where both of you were forced to see yourselves more clearly. They are beginning to understand how fear shaped decisions they once called logic. They are seeing how pride disguised itself as independence. They are recognizing that certain choices were made not because they did not care, but because caring frightened them more than losing did at the time. Now losing feels different. That difference is what has shaken them. Something happened emotionally that made the possibility of never truly speaking to you again feel real. Maybe it was a conversation with someone close to them. Maybe they saw another person repair a relationship they thought was beyond saving. Maybe they heard your name unexpectedly. Maybe they came across something that reminded them how quickly life moves. Whatever the exact catalyst, it created one piercing thought inside them: what if I wait too long? They could not dismiss that question as easily as before. It followed them through the day. It returned at night. It entered the spaces where distraction usually protected them, and suddenly the silence they had once chosen began to feel heavier. They imagined you moving forward without them. Not as a punishment. Not as something they resent you for. They imagined you becoming happier, stronger, more peaceful, perhaps eventually opening your heart to someone who does not hesitate to value you. And that image forced them to confront the cost of their indecision. For the first time, the question was no longer whether they were ready. The question became whether life would continue waiting for them to become ready. This is the moment their heart began reaching for you with new urgency. Still, they have not known how to cross the distance. They wonder whether a simple message would seem too casual after everything unspoken. They wonder whether honesty would overwhelm you. They wonder whether they should tell you about the difficult situation they are facing or keep it hidden until they feel stronger. They do not want your sympathy to be the reason you listen. What they secretly want is something far more vulnerable. They want you to see who they are beneath the struggle and decide for yourself whether there is still a doorway between your hearts. There may be things happening around them that you know nothing about. Responsibilities they have not shared. Emotional pressure they have minimized. A decision that has been weighing on them. A disappointment that made them question people they trusted. They may have recently discovered that someone they expected to stand beside them could not offer the understanding they needed. That realization hurt, but it also illuminated something. It made them remember that you once offered something rare, not perfect agreement, not constant reassurance, but a kind of attention that made them feel that their inner world mattered. They did not know how valuable that was until they needed it and could not find it elsewhere. But listen carefully, because the next part changes the meaning of everything. Your soulmate's difficult time is not only pushing them toward you. It is also pushing them toward a decision about their own life. They are standing at an emotional threshold. Behind them is the version of themselves that delays, hides, waits, and allows fear to make choices. Ahead of them is a version that speaks even when the voice trembles, admits when something matters, and accepts that love always involves uncertainty. They have not fully stepped through that threshold yet, but they are closer than they have ever been. And strangely, you have been undergoing your own transformation at the same time. You may not have noticed how much stronger you have become because strength rarely feels dramatic while it is being built. It was created each time you chose not to send the message you knew came from panic. It grew each time you stopped trying to decode another person's silence and returned your attention to your own peace. It grew whenever you reminded yourself that being loved should not require constantly proving your worth. You have become less willing to survive on fragments. Less willing to accept confusion as romance. Less willing to mistake intensity for consistency. And that growth matters because if your soulmate returns, they will not be meeting the same version of you they once knew. They sense this. Perhaps that is part of why they are afraid. They know something in you has changed. Even from a distance, there is a feeling that your energy has become less accessible to uncertainty. You are no longer standing at the same emotional door waiting indefinitely for someone to knock. Your life is moving. Your heart is learning. Your standards are becoming clearer. There is tenderness in you, yes, but there is also discernment now. And somewhere inside, your soulmate understands that if they approach, sincerity will not be optional. This realization has created a second layer of pressure around them. They are not only dealing with what is difficult in their present circumstances, they are also confronting the possibility that their opportunity with you may not remain open forever. That does not mean you should use distance to manipulate them. It means your growth has naturally changed the balance. Where you once may have been the one hoping they would choose clarity, they are now beginning to wonder whether you would choose them if clarity finally came. They have imagined the conversation. More than once. They have imagined you answering with warmth. They have imagined you answering cautiously. They have imagined you saying you need time. They have even imagined you telling them that too much has happened and you cannot return to what was. Every version frightens them in a different way, but one possibility frightens them most: saying nothing and never discovering which answer was true. That fear may become the force that finally moves them. There is something else, though, something they have not fully understood yet. The reason they need you is not what they initially thought. At first, they believed they wanted your comfort because life felt heavy. But as they examined their feelings, they realized comfort is not the whole story. They want your truth. They want to hear the perspective they once avoided. They want to know what you saw in them that they could not see in themselves. They want to understand how you experienced the connection, because they are beginning to suspect that their assumptions about your heart were wrong. For a long time, they may have believed you were stronger than you felt. They saw you continue, so they assumed you were unaffected. They saw you remain dignified, so they assumed you had detached easily. They saw moments of silence from you and interpreted them through their own fears. They did not realize that sometimes your silence was not absence of feeling. It was self-respect. It was exhaustion. It was the moment you understood that repeatedly explaining your heart to someone who was not ready to receive it would only wound you both. Now they are beginning to see the past from your side. That perspective is uncomfortable. It has forced them to revisit moments they once justified. A conversation where they became distant when you needed honesty. A time they made you question whether you mattered because they were afraid to admit how much you did. A moment when you extended emotional openness and they responded with confusion. They are not remembering these things to punish themselves. They are remembering them because growth requires truth, and truth rarely flatters us at first. One memory in particular has stayed with them. There was something you said, perhaps casually, perhaps during an emotional moment, that they did not fully understand then. The words seemed ordinary at the time, but now they hear them differently. Maybe you told them that communication mattered. Maybe you said you did not need perfection, only honesty. Maybe you reminded them that you could understand difficult truths more easily than unexplained distance. Whatever the exact words were, their meaning has returned with force because the difficult situation they are facing has shown them exactly why you said them. They are beginning to understand that you were not asking them to have every answer. You were asking them to let you stand beside the unanswered questions. That is a painful realization because it means the connection may have been less impossible than they believed. Fear made it complicated. Timing made it complicated. Unhealed patterns made it complicated. But somewhere beneath all of that, there may always have been something simple, two people wanting to be understood and being afraid to reveal how much understanding mattered. Now your soulmate is tired of hiding behind complexity. Yet before they can reach you, there is one issue they must resolve, and this is where their difficult time becomes connected to the future in a way neither of you expected. There is a decision around them that cannot be postponed much longer. It involves letting go of something that has kept them emotionally divided. This may be an old attachment, a responsibility they have allowed to define them, an expectation placed on them by others, a lifestyle that no longer reflects who they are, or simply the deeply rooted habit of choosing what feels safe over what feels authentic. They have reached the point where remaining unchanged is beginning to hurt more than transformation. And your name appears somewhere on the other side of that decision. Not because every choice should revolve around you, but because the life they secretly imagine becoming possible requires them to stop living against their own heart. They know they cannot ask for genuine love while continuing to hide behind emotional avoidance. They cannot ask you to trust them while avoiding the truth within themselves. They cannot say they need you and then disappear whenever the connection becomes real. Something has to change. They know it. And recently, they may have said something to someone about you. Not everything. Just enough. Perhaps a trusted friend noticed they were unusually quiet. Perhaps a relative asked why they seemed distracted. Perhaps someone mentioned relationships, regrets, or missed opportunities, and your soulmate responded more emotionally than expected. They may not have said your full story. But they revealed something that surprised even them. They admitted there was someone they still thought about. Someone they wished they had handled differently.